Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Murray, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to the University of Guelph and to the fourth President's Dialogue. The President's Dialogues provide a forum to explore issues of contemporary importance. Our focus today is Hunger Has No Boundaries. We are pleased to have made this event more accessible by broadcasting it on the internet, thus allowing us to bridge many boundaries and bring a truly global perspective to today's discussion. So let me extend then a special welcome to our virtual audience. We have present in Rosansky Hall members of the University of Guelph, students, staff, and faculty. In particular, we are honored to recognize the trustees of the University of Guelph and the members of the Board of Governors. May I ask you to please rise to be recognized? We also have with us today many members of our local community. The university values every opportunity to unite with our friends and neighbors, and this is especially the case when we come together to reflect upon issues that critically affect our world. There is one group that needs a special recognition today. We have with us some 400 delegates to the university's Fighting World Hunger Summit. This group includes students, faculty, and administrators, and representatives of business, non-governmental organizations, and governments. They come to us from across the globe. Please welcome them. The shape of our dialogue this afternoon is just that, a discussion. There will be no formal presentations. Rather, the President will guide an open and unscripted discussion amongst our distinguished guests. This, we believe, will lead to lively and spontaneous debate and to a deeper exploration of issues from multiple perspectives. This is an unparalleled opportunity for people who are not likely to be together again like this, to share ideas and perspectives, and we are privileged to participate in this experience. After discussion among our guests, all of us present, both live and virtually, will have an opportunity to join the dialogue. It is a distinct privilege to introduce our host and moderator of the dialogue, a person who embodies the University of Guelph's commitment to truly making this a better planet. Please welcome the President of the University of Guelph, Dr. Alistair Summerlee.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and welcome to everyone. The President's Dialogue, as Jacqueline has explained, is something that we have held now on a number of occasions. Because this is the first time that the annual summit of universities fighting world hunger is to be held outside the United States, we thought that it would be most appropriate to link the President's Dialogue with the summit on universities fighting world hunger. And to make some remarks at the beginning, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you two individuals who represent both a Canadian perspective and an American perspective. I would like to ask the Honorable Madame Jean to come forward, as I think she probably needs very little introduction to people in Canada. I am going to just say a few words about the remarkable commitment and achievements that you have demonstrated, Madame. Originally from Haiti, Madame Jean came to Canada and very rapidly became known as an internationally effective and most attentive journalist. In 2005, she was asked to become the Governor General of Canada, the representative of the Queen here in Canada, a position that she served with great distinction for 5 years until 2010. She has most recently been appointed as the UNESCO Special Envoy to Haiti. I suspect that all Canadians, and probably many around the world, will recollect Madame Jean most particularly during the appalling aftermath of the earthquake and the tragedies that have happened in Haiti. Her passion and commitment to the people of Haiti, and in fact to all people who are in trouble around the world, is a model that I suspect we would all wish to be able to emulate. Ladies and gentlemen, Madame Michaëlle Jean.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Merci. Ambassador Jacobson, Senator Wallin, President Sommerly, members of the panel, distinguished guests, dear friends. I am truly pleased to be in such eminent company this afternoon at the university's Fighting World Hunger Summit's President's Dialogue. And I would like to congratulate the University of Guelph for hosting the summit. I understand, as Mr. Sommerly said, that it is the first time that it is taking place on Canadian soil. And I would say how lucky we are. By gathering here today, we join our voices to those of millions of women, men, and children around the globe who are calling for a world free from hunger. We, the peoples of the United Nations, stand determined to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples. These words, ever since the very founding of the United Nations, have been the bedrock of the international declarations, conventions, and treaties that bind the international community in a global pact of solidarity. But they have really become flesh through the actions of people like you, laboring for change in their communities, in their schools, across large expanses of land, and more recently, through the social networks of the internet. You and all these people are the true trailblazers, those movers and shakers who every day breathe new life, new opportunities, and new hope into our societies by bringing us steps closer to our dream of a world fully liberated from the yoke of tyranny, poverty, and hunger. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that at the dawn of the new millennia, 55 years after the United Nations was founded, we, the peoples, became the rallying call of 147 heads of state convened at the General Assembly to build a global partnership that could illuminate a new path towards world peace, justice, and prosperity. Drawing on the outcomes of several UN summits, they endorsed a new blueprint for global transformation. It was a glorious moment for everyone, a new day. We were all on the cusp of an unprecedented opportunity to corral the world around the goals outlined in what UN member states coined the Millennium Declaration. And more than a lyrical statement of intent, the declaration laid out clear, measurable, quantified, time-bound targets, the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, to save and transform the lives of billions of people in the space of 15 years. And the first MDG is a commitment to have the proportion of people suffering from hunger to halve the proportion of people suffering from hunger by 2015. This prescient choice reflects the awareness at the time that while 29% of the world's population earned 60% of the world's income, 60% of the global population was living on less than $1 a day. And such alarming statistics spurred the international community into action as major multilateral, regional, and national agencies worked around the clock to formulate more effective strategies to curb the problem. While it is true that their energy and enthusiasm sparked new global partnerships and commitments, it is equally true that their efforts proved insufficient. For by 2009, more than 2 billion people were deficient in micronutrients. 1 billion were plagued by hunger. 195 million children had fallen prey to stunted growth. As you can imagine, the crisis was only heightened in countries that suddenly found themselves plunged into disarray following a natural disaster, such as the horrible earthquake that destroyed much of my native country, Haiti, last year. And to be clear, until the tragic January 12th disaster, Haiti was making quite impressive gains in reducing food insecurity, with 1.9 million people suffering from hunger according to the World Food Programme. Following the earthquake, however, that number doubled to 4 million as food imports and food availability crumbled. These figures for the world and for Haiti did not emerge in a vacuum. They are inextricably linked to a surge in the prices of primary food products and, of course, to the 2008 global financial crisis, which only worsened an already worrisome situation. As the theme of our dialogue suggests, hunger has no boundaries. This means that our efforts to combat food insecurity cannot and must not be pursued in isolation from initiatives that address other global ills. Nor should they be centered on short-term, piecemeal initiatives for immediate relief. The fight against hunger desperately cries out for a new ethic of sustainable sharing that encapsulates everyone, everywhere. Why? Because the recent financial crisis has taught us that in an era of hyper-globalization, our destinies are intertwined tighter than we could ever have imagined. The fight against hunger is not only about providing immediate access to food. Fighting hunger is also about combating poverty and undertaking a paradigm shift in the theory and practice of international cooperation. Haiti, for example, is a perfect illustration of the necessity of shifting from a logic of assistance and dependency in favor of a logic of long-term investment. For decades, humanitarian assistance transformed Haiti into some kind of a laboratory for all kinds of experiments, thousands of new projects, and a slew of uncoordinated and deficient strategies which never ever produced results that could be sustained over time. And the struggle against hunger in Haiti has been no different. In the name of humanitarian assistance, food products such as tons and tons of rice were distributed to the Haitian people. Rather than solving the problem of food insufficiency, this actually led to the collapse of local agricultural production, creating a dependency on food imports from abroad and killing the local economy. We have yet to learn from this catastrophic approach to emergency assistance that has brought more harm than good. Haiti requires a truly preventative strategy that can generate food self-sufficiency through long-term investment in Haitian capacities, in local agricultural production, in skills and knowledge, and in efforts to establish the conditions necessary for the emergence of a truly national economy. And local communities must be engaged in this effort, and local universities and researchers must be supported in their quest for more creative and innovative solutions adapted to local needs. That is why education, good and strong governance are also key in fighting hunger. And it is precisely this philosophy that guides UNESCO's work in Haiti, with Haitians, that supports a medium and long-term strategy fully integrated within the Haitian government's action plan for national recovery and development of Haiti, which rests on 4 pillars: territorial rebuilding, economic rebuilding, social rebuilding, and institutional rebuilding. This plan has been fully endorsed by the international community in March 2010 as the blueprint for Haiti's recovery and reconstruction. Ultimately, to fight world hunger, we must all strive to revive the mobilization, the creative ideas, the partnerships, and of course, the political will that reached its pinnacle in 2000 and rechannel it into a more effective global movement for change. And that is why I'm so pleased to see that the universities fighting world hunger is playing such an indispensable role in this struggle. I believe that your contribution is essential. For universities have always been bastions of critical thought, innovation, and action, often bridging community, research, business, policy, and government in unique ways that have the potential to bring policy, system, and even structural changes at all levels. Summits and dialogues like this one are indispensable in helping to tease out new ideas and new approaches that will help the world get back on track to achieving the MDGs. And yes, the situation may seem bleak, but judging by the determination and ideas in this room, we, the peoples, are determined more than ever to turn the tide on world hunger. And that's why, dear friends, I cannot wait to hear from you, and why I too am delighted that the fight against hunger is not the concern of only a few, but is today the object of a mobilization that has the potential to save millions of lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madame Jean. One of the marvelous extensions of our ability to be able to broadcast this on the web and to have it available in the longer term is that although, as Jacqueline Murray said when she introduced this, that we had 400 visitors to the summit, we weren't entirely in control of the weather, and we know that there are a number of people stranded in airports across North America waiting to get here for the summit. So it will be marvelous to have your words recorded so that they can catch up when they arrive. Thank you so much for making those passionate and committed remarks. I'd like to introduce Ambassador David Jacobson to you. Ambassador Jacobson is the American ambassador to Canada, and he has had a career that has mostly been in the world of law. As he explained earlier, the move to Ottawa, which happened recently, was not perhaps as dramatic as one might have imagined, because most of his career has been spent in Chicago, so he was used to the kind of weather that Ottawa would provide. Ambassador Jacobson was fundamentally involved in the campaign that saw a major shift in American politics when Barack Obama became the President of the United States. When he went before the hearings that he might be appointed as the United States Ambassador to Canada, there was unanimous consent by the hearing that he should be appointed. And in 2009, Ambassador Jacobson took up his position in Ottawa. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador David Jacobson.
President Summerlee, not only am I used to this weather, I love this weather. Madame Jean, Senator Wallen, President Summerlee, panelists, honored guests, friends, I am delighted to be here at the University of Guelph. I am particularly delighted to join in this event with two great women and dear friends, Madame Jean and your own Chancellor, Senator Wallen. They have both served this country and this world nobly, and it's an honor to be up here with them. It's also a privilege to be here at the first summit that has been held outside my country, the United States. I think this is a very important step in ensuring a global approach to ending world hunger. And I cannot think of a better place to hold this event than here in Canada. This is a country that is a respected leader in the battle to combat global hunger and to increase nutrition. Fighting world hunger is an example of how the United States and Canada have similar values, how we're committed to the same international goals, and how we serve as partners on the world stage. It's also fitting that assembled here are students, university representatives, business leaders, international organizations, NGOs, governments. Each of them has their own role in the fight to end world hunger. Your presence here follows the lead of the G8 and the G20 summits held here in Canada last summer. Those summits established a common global framework for coordinated and comprehensive action to improve world food security among governments, donors, civil society, the private sector, and other stakeholders at all levels. President Obama and the administration that I represent here are committed to ending global hunger, not simply at the level of providing food, but beyond, to providing assistance necessary for sustainable food security everywhere. As Secretary Clinton has said, the question is not whether we can end hunger, but whether we will. And I am here to tell you that my country is committed to that goal. It is imperative that we deal with world hunger in a permanent and in a lasting way. The United States has developed its Feed the Future program to address global hunger and food security and to fulfill our commitments in the Michaëlle Food Security Conference in 2009. Our focus has been on the nutritional needs during the first 1,000 days of life, from conception to age 2. The president at the Michaëlle Conference pledged $3.5 billion for agricultural development and food security over a 3-year period. This was part of an international commitment of more than $22 billion from other donors in support of a common approach to achieve sustainable food security. In 2010, the United States spent over $800 million toward that pledge. We cannot overstate the importance of feeding people, but it's also vital to provide the means to sustainably produce the necessary food. In poor countries, the agricultural sector accounts for about 1/3 of GDP. Undernutrition costs developing countries up to 3% of their annual GDP, and it places individuals at risk of losing more than 10% of their lifetime earning potential. Feed the Future was created to address hunger reduction in the long term, but feeding people is not just about food. It goes beyond that to facilitating an environment that is conducive to enabling people to improve their own lives. It takes governments working together with the private sector and with development organizations in order to make a difference. I applaud your commitment to looking beyond your own borders and to making a difference in the world. My hope is that the enthusiasm that you have here today will carry through in your future lives so that we can all work together until global hunger is eradicated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jacobson. And I would like to underscore that the shift in policy that has been created by the Obama government with the Feed the Future program, I think is one of the strongest and possibly the longest lasting legacies of the Obama government that we will all come to recognize. It is my great privilege to be able to introduce the members of the panel to you. Let me begin with the woman who is sitting on second from your left, June Henton. I should say Dr. June Henton, as she received a Doctor of Laws honoris causa from the University of Guelph earlier this week. But Dr. Henton has a doctorate of her own, for she is the Dean of the College of Human Sciences at Auburn University and is the founder of Universities Fighting World Hunger. When I was first told about June, it was explained to me that you would never imagine this lady that you see would have such power and such force, but she does, and you never say no to her. It is a real pleasure for us to have you here, June. Let me talk about Senator Pamela Wallin. As you notice, Pamela is not quite as mobile as she has been of late. And we did have a little bit of trouble at the beginning because we realized we didn't have a ramp to get her onto the stage. So I want very publicly to say this is the second time that I'm apologizing to Pamela for having embarrassed her in public. She had to hop up the steps and then across the stage to get to her chair. I won't tell you what the other time was. The memory of it is too painful for me to recount. Senator Pamela Wallin was also a journalist of many years and with great credibility, until, as she says, there was a chance phone call that came asking her to become a diplomat. I don't imagine that it was a chance phone call at all, when she went to become the Consul General for Canada in New York immediately after 9/11. And now she serves in the Senate of Canada. She has been the Chancellor of the University of Guelph, and over this week, despite the physical infirmity, has managed to be present at 7 convocations and to give every single student the kind of personal attention that they deserve. Pamela has spent a considerable amount of time thinking about issues, particularly in Afghanistan, and I suspect that a combination of her experiences will come to bear in the discussions we're about to have. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Pamela Wallin. On the far right is Dr. Quentin Johnson, also received an honorary degree from the University of Guelph this week. There can be few people in this world that can say, through their work, they have indirectly and directly impacted 30% of the world's population. But Quentin Johnson can. A man who is truly committed to issues of enriching flour and fortifying flour with essential nutrients. He has made an astonishing difference to the lives of people living with hunger and malnutrition. Quentin, it is a great pleasure to have you here today. And next to Quentin is Kwojo Asenso Ochere. Kwojo is in fact a member of the U of G. That is, he's actually a graduate of the University of Guelph, but he's also a professor of another U of G, where he was the Vice Chancellor as well, the University of Ghana, which is his home country. So there are 2 really strong bonds of connection with Kwojo and the University of Guelph. He is now currently the director of the East and Southern Region branch of the International Food Policy Research Institute in Africa, and has spent a great deal of his time working on poverty reduction standards across the African continent. Kwojo, it is a great pleasure to have you here. And last but not least, I am delighted to introduce to you Ramiro Lopes da Silva, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the World Food Programme from Rome. In fact, all of the things that we do have strange connections, but until recently, Ramiro was involved in emergency relief in Haiti, and then, in fact, in a whole series of programs associated with the World Food Programme across a number of different assignments. Originally an engineer by training, he has demonstrated a real elegance and commitment to issues trying to deal with both food security, food supply, and the preservation of people who are hungry. Ladies and gentlemen, Ramiro Lopes da Silva. And now I'm going to move venues, and I do want to emphasize that what we're about to do is entirely unscripted. I have had a number of questions asked by the panelists about what I was going to say, what kind of questions would I ask, and I have point-blankly refused to answer them on any of those. So in the best university tradition, this is a kind of PhD examination with 5 candidates who are about to defend their lives in front of a live audience. Maybe I can begin by picking up on a theme that we heard a little bit about in the elegant introductions by both Madame Jean and Ambassador Jacobson. Hunger is something that we see in many different guises, at home and abroad. But quite often when we see images of hunger, we are shown an image of an African face or people in Africa who are hungry. And yet, there are 3 times more people in Asia who are hungry than in the African continent. So maybe the first question I could throw out to the group, and I'm going to be kind and leave it open to any one of you to try and respond, is why is that? Why do we portray hunger from an African perspective more commonly than we do from home or from Asia?
I guess the television journalists have to speak to that one in part, because it really is about imagery. And in television, you use shorthand. You try to find the symbol. And in this world today, with everything that's going on, whether it's Libya today or Haiti last year or whatever it might be, you have to find an image that will shock or catalyze. It will bring people to the screen and have them not walk off and get their snack at that point where it's going on. So you tend to find an image that's powerful. I think when we first started seeing those images, they were powerful. And now they've become stereotypes. And it's also allowed us, I think, to pretend that it's they, not we. And that's what the picture does. It's not about the kids that are going to school in Canada in the morning who are hungry because they haven't had breakfast. And we need to deal with that too. So it's given us some distance, and it's just kind of a shorthand that becomes far too simplistic to capture the problem.
Quentin, you looked as if you were about to step into the...
Well, you talked about countries in Asia, and I was born in India, and I visited India several times. And I'm not quite sure why the hunger that is shown on TV in the Western world doesn't also apply to the peoples of India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, who are equally as hungry as any of the other people in Africa and indeed in other parts of the world. I think part of it, in my view, following on what Chancellor Pamela Wallin has said, is that it's an image, and the image in some ways has become stereotyped, and I think that's very unfortunate. I've had the privilege to work with hungry people in Africa, and it is a privilege to work with them. And it's a privilege to try and help them. And very often, we lose sense of that through the imagery that we see on TV.
And unfortunately,
it does become stereotyped, and we become desensitized to it.
Exactly.
So it comes back again, and there she is again. No, we don't want to see that, so we flip the channel. And we lose that sense of urgency because we've seen it so much, and it's somewhat predictable.
It was interesting to me, we had a session earlier today, and we're talking about hunger issues, and one of the individuals who I know quite well began to talk about a moment when she went to her son or daughter's school and saw a moment when one of the parents showed that they were hungry and that they had been, their son dropped the bag that had the lunch in, and a few crusts dropped out, and the parent immediately picked up the crusts and gobbled them down, clearly demonstrating that he was hungry. And this so profoundly affected this individual that when she recounted the story, she wept. It brought an immediacy to it that was so totally different from the images of hunger that one sees on the television.
No, I think the stereotype comes partly because the countries in Africa are countries which are also tend to be low income, food deficit, more vulnerable to disasters, and as a result attract more journalists. It's also more difficult to explain the issues of hunger when you are speaking in a context of emerging economies or developed economies, like the economies of North America. And indeed, you are absolutely right, President. 255, 1/4 of the hungry poor in the world reside in one country, India. 255 million people. But India has the capacities to address those issues, makes large investments on those issues, but have not yet found eventually the correct framework, the correct set of policies. But I give you another example of another similar emerging economy that took on the issues of hunger and has made progress in the last 10 years that are fantastic and an example for all of us, which is Brazil during with the Fome Zero, the zero hunger vision and strategy that President Lula brought to place. So indeed there is a stereotype, and indeed hunger has multiple faces, and it was easy to deal with the issue of hunger if hunger was only the face that shows on our screens every day.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Well, I think it's truly stereotyping, but the issue is that people don't want to hear a good story. When you travel, we want to take pictures of dilapidated children, dilapidated buildings, and things like that. You don't want to take pictures, for instance, in the capital city. You would like to go to a remote village and take pictures. And I've seen people who do that all the time because a good story is not really a nice one. Africa has been doing very well. From 2000 till this time, the growth in agriculture has averaged about 5%, and nobody talks about that. IFPRI 2 weeks ago had a major conference in New Delhi. Why did we go to New Delhi? Because it is a country whose per capita income has been increasing, but yes, the malnourishment is one of the highest in the world. So the Prime Minister himself said this is a dilemma. How do we explain this? So we took a major conference there to explain some of the reasons why it is happening that way. So we need to look at it from that point of view. People don't want to even see the progress that is being made in Africa. When you go to my country, Ghana, Ghana has already achieved the Millennium Development Goal 1 on hunger. Halved it a long time ago. Poverty, we're going to achieve it. Nobody talks about it. We read a few papers here and there which is talking about this. So good stories from Africa are not being told. And I think this is what is happening. Always, it is the colonial mentality that is being pursued because people have been poor and dilapidated. So when progress comes, they don't want to hear about it. How do you make the difference between a country which is making so much progress in Asia and then still say that poverty, hunger is available? Nobody will buy that story. So we need to relate it to where people know there is a lot of poverty because there's a relationship between poverty and hunger. And that is what is happening. Yeah.
So if this is happening, does it actually inhibit our ability to address hunger and poverty issues, or is it something that we should move right over and simply continue to work in the areas that we are working?
Well, we're always going to react to crisis. There's always going to be some flood, some disaster, some earthquake that is going to grab our attention for a moment. and only just, and we'll contribute to that. But I think even what we heard today from former Governor General, from the ambassadors, there are programs in place. Like, people are starting to get their head around this. The problem is, as you quite rightly say, good news doesn't make the news. And so there are some things going on. I was telling some of my friends earlier that I was in India last summer and walked into a provincial legislature in the middle of nowhere and was introduced as a senator from Saskatchewan. And I, you know, sometimes I have trouble in Canada explaining to people where that is. And all of the Indian parliamentarians sitting around the table said, lentils, lentils. You're sending us lentils, the fortified, better, you know, high protein lentils. They know this connection. They know that they're running, their access to land is restricted and shrinking. They know that that strategic resource, potash, is still a little hard for them to come by, water, all of these complicated issues. And they're now starting to see this as answers. People are figuring out how to reach out to one another, do business with one another to solve some of these problems, but it isn't. We don't put the good news stories on there. So in a sense, it does prevent us from moving forward if we think it's just poor starving babies with big eyes looking up at us plaintively, because that's not what we need to respond to, and it isn't about putting a dollar in the mail. These are much more complicated answers.
I would say that has not precluded World Food Programme. We are commemorating 50 years of existence this year. And that has not precluded WFP to continue pursuing our mandate, our vision, our goal in the different contexts where we have to confront hunger. In a way, we have a very easy, simple mandate. No? Our mandate is connecting people with the food, with nutritious food. So in that sense, it's very easy. It's more complicated when you try to deploy that on the ground, and you need to look for the right partnerships to leverage the knowledge, the experience that exists elsewhere and not with us, and position ourselves vis-à-vis the national governments of the different countries and the different economies in ways that we find the correct engagement with those countries. We were speaking about Ghana. Ghana is a country have reached the MDG 1. So it's a country that for the WFP is graduating from our assistance. We will move to a different type of engagement with the government of Ghana because we still can, being a multilateral organization, we still can leverage experiences that are useful for Ghana as Ghana and its people move forward. But so we try always to position ourselves within the context where the issues of hunger needed to be addressed, and the level of engagement of the national authorities vis-à-vis those issues.
What sort of size budget are you dealing with in terms of the actions of the World Food Programme?
That's a great and a difficult question. Last year, what we call our program of work, but basically is WFP's needs-based response, because we don't have a budget. We are, although United Nations, we are very much like an NGO. We raise every dollar we need for our operations. So last year, our assessed needs was budgeted somewhere around $6.8, $6.9 billion, and these days does make difference if it is Canadian dollar or American dollar. And we have raised $3.8 billion. Most of those resources, unfortunately, are used for humanitarian assistance are used in context of responses to major shocks, the earthquake in Haiti, the floods in Pakistan, the drought in the Sahel, but a portion of it is used first for us to support communities moving away from that situation of shock, so to engage those communities in recovery, rehabilitation, and a portion is used for what we call our long-term food assistance activities, particularly school feeding in support of education and nutrition outcomes.
I must say that for me it was quite surprising to appreciate that in fact the World Food Programme has to raise that money every year in order to be able to respond both to the tragedies that occur and to think of the long-term issues. And it made me reflect on the enormous imbalance there is in terms of agricultural policies and the subsidy question for food in the developed world when we are so much in need of monies to be able to deal with real challenges. How do we infuse global and humanitarian values across the globe when it comes to issues of food and that differential between those countries that put in place subsidies that affect the price of food in the home country and have a quite dramatic effect in the developing world?
I think we do it through education. We start with the next generation. And what you said about the subsidy issue is not simple. There are major economic implications for many countries around the world, and it sounds easy to say, well, let's just find a way to change the policy and make them more humanitarian, but there has to be a sustainable way to work toward accomplishing this. And I would contend that we do that by helping to better understand the circumstances of this whole world order as it relates to feeding people, and count on the next generation to really move us in the direction that we need to go.
Some of the statistics are so appalling. You know, we have enough food. We just don't have the ability to get it out there. 30 to 50%, even if it's a low end, even if it's a quarter of the food that's produced in the world is wasted. Wasted because it took too long to get across a border and it rotted in the truck, or there was some bug that year, or some government regulation that might have held it up or declared that it was unusable in some circumstance. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to be talking about to shock the developed world into this. You know, it's all good and well and good to talk about how generous we are, and Canada is an extremely generous country, there's no question, and we've got lots to give, and yes, we are the breadbasket of the world in many places and all of that sort of thing. But we've got to figure out how to deliver this stuff and structure that system in a much more efficient way. I'm a big proponent of free trade. I think that's the way you try and deal with some of the domestic subsidy issues that go on in the developed world. I think that's the way you deal with some of the problems in a huge, needy, hungry, gobbling country like China. You know, you've got to try and have a mechanism for talking to each other at every level, but there has to be an economic connection. That has to be the penny that drops in people's hands. This is not charitable giving. This is how we have to make the global interconnected world function, and you do that by having some rules around it. And free trade is a good place to start, to try and inject ourselves in an intelligent way into the countries that need assistance or education or development.
Well, I think giving should be a short-term measure. It should be something that should respond to an emergency. I don't think we should have a policy that continuously gives. We need to be able to teach people how to fish instead of just giving them the fish all the time. Absolutely. If we are able to develop the knowledge that people need, take the knowledge to the people, they can really increase their productivity, because the whole issue about food and all of these things is low productivity in the countries that we're talking about. If you take a country that produces less than 1 ton per hectare of maize or corn, as opposed to the potential of about 6 to 8 to 10 tons per hectare, then what are we talking about? Why don't we take steps to increase it from that 1 ton per hectare to say 3 or 4 or 5 tons per hectare instead of just giving? You see? But when there is an emergency, there's the need to do something. I believe in social protection where those who cannot afford, for some reason, you had to be assisted to come to the stage because of your whatever is happening to you. But this cannot happen all the time.
It's his fault. Exactly right. But I'm going to milk it as long as I can.
Thank you very much.